Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm so glad that you could join us this evening. So for our anxiety and mental health in the home webinar, we're so happy to share this evening with you, and we hope you know just how amazing it is that you value the importance of your and your family members' mental health. I think it's a very important issue that's overlooked, and right now it's very evident as you see how many people are getting rage or depression or just feeling otherwise with all the load shedding, the increased petrol prices, and just how hard life is in general. So I'd like to welcome my fellow speakers, Terence Mentor, better known as Aphrodaddy, and Claire McPhail, who's the owner of Inspiring. They both share my passion for mental health. I'm so happy I get to share this space with them this evening. As we go along, please do pop any questions you have into the chat. If you could just start off with the speaker that you're addressing, and then at the end, we'll address all the questions in a Q&A session. And then without further ado, I will be passing over to Aphrodaddy, very charismatic. I know we're going to have a lovely time with him. So over to you. I'm just going to put myself on mute and turn off. Yeah. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Thank you for the introduction. Charismatic is something that I'm not described as very often, so I will take the compliment. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to be part of this. It's always a bit nerve-wracking and a bit of a privilege, both of those, to be speaking about mental health and to be engaging in these mental health conversations. I would like to share my screen, so I can't do that until you enable me to do that, Natasha. Natasha, on my side, I'm seeing host has disabled participant.
Okay, there you go.
There we go. I still
That's
can't.
my slide.
That's your slide, yeah.
That's my slide, Tess.
Sorry. I don't know how to, if you go onto your screen share.
When I still see that I've been disabled to share my screen.
Oh, let me just, okay, sorry, Terence. Learning curve, okay. Everyone, sorry.
Learning curve. And actually it's not super crucial, but it's just to make sure that I stay on topic, because otherwise I'll veer all over the place. While we sort it out, I just need to let you know, yeah, I'm not a mental health expert. I have no training in the field of offering mental health support. So my role here is just to give a perspective from, a dad's perspective, a man's perspective, as well as talk about my own personal journey. So my hope is that if you or someone you know is going through something similar to what I went through, that you might be able to kind of learn from the mistakes that I made and maybe make moves earlier than I made, make those big decisions, make those big do the actions that are required a little bit earlier than I did, and maybe save yourself some pain and heartbreak. So that being said, I still can't share my screen. That's okay, not crucial. I thought it'd be good for me to give you a little bit of my...
Right now.
There we go. Yes. Okay, there we go. You should be able to see my screen. And if I go... Yes, there we go. Great. So I'm going to start with just a little bit of my backstory. I think some people on the call, I recognize some of the names, so you might know me, so I apologize if you know this already, but I'm assuming that most people don't. I'm a dad to two boys, Liam and Eli. We adopted Liam he's almost 8, so almost 8 years ago. No, he's 8.5. 8.5 years ago, we adopted Liam. And about 18 months after Liam arrived, Eli arrived very unexpectedly. And so suddenly I went from being not a dad to being a dad to two. And Eli in particular he wasn't a very difficult baby. He was a baby in a difficult situation. I'm trying to make sure that I phrased that correctly. He was born a bit prem. So he had a lot of discomfort, which meant a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of crying, a lot of anxiety. around this new person in our home. At the same time, work was really unfulfilling. It was very stressful. I had no real idea of where I was heading with that. While all of that was happening, I still had the facade of being the happy guy. So the guy you're seeing now smiling at you was the guy you would have probably still have seen at this time, which was about 7-8 years ago. I kind of took it upon myself to always be the mood lifter of any room I was in. So whether that meant with my friends, with my colleagues at work, with my family at home, if I walked into the room, my goal was to make sure that people felt, lighter and happier. And often that meant me taking on other people's burdens and anxieties, all the while pushing my own feelings further and further deeper inside and hiding from them. That all came to a head one day at work when I just had what I could only describe as a bit of a nervous breakdown. Not a bit of a nervous breakdown, a massive breakdown. I started crying. I didn't know why I was crying. I had to call my best friend to offer to get some sort of help because I didn't know what I was going to do. I had feelings that all I needed to do was just run away. I needed to get into my car and drive and get away from everything, my family, my work. I just needed to get away. I didn't know how to cope with whatever I was feeling. Fortunately, my friend then put me in touch with a counselor. he clearly saw what was happening, and that counselor kind of brought me back from the edge. And what I had realized through that counseling session and 2.5 years of therapy after that was that I'd actually been suffering with anxiety and depression for a very long part of my life, and that I thought was just normal. I thought it was normal to feel the way I was feeling. And I thought it was normal to push those feelings away to make sure that I could continue to be the happy-go-lucky guy that I wanted everyone else to perceive me as being. So when that happened, when I got the diagnosis, when I went on for a short period, I was on antidepressants. I was on anxiety medication to help stabilize my mood. While I was on there, I was able to kind of look back at my life and see so many areas where it was clear now that I knew that I was suffering with this. I could see how it affected my schoolwork. I could see how it affected my life at university, and I could definitely see how it affected my relationships all through growing up into adulthood. Of course, again, it's hard to see those things when you're in it, but having that opportunity to go through therapy and really pick those things apart while being very difficult was a great opportunity to take a look back at your life and go, okay, these things now actually make a lot more sense why I struggled in the way I struggled. In some ways, I kind of am very thankful to Eli, because I think without having that extreme exhaustion and extra burden of that second child, I think I could have probably continued to pretend that everything was okay for a lot longer. And the longer I pretended, the worse the breakdown would have been. So in a way, he kind of saved me from something much, much worse. Although that's not the kind of burden that you want to place on your children, which is why we're having this conversation now. If you can, from my story, potentially get the help you need earlier, you can save yourself a lot of heartbreak and pain. So one of the things I wanted to mention in my story, in this kind of backstory, is that I did go on medication at the beginning. Obviously, some people, depending on what your diagnosis is and severity, you might need longer or less. I'm not a doctor, but for me, it was a real hurdle, the idea of having to go on medication for my mental health. I really had to jump over that in quite a big way. And the way I got over that was by my doctor explained to me that if I have a broken leg, he'll give me a crutch. Now, the crutch doesn't heal the broken leg. The body heals the broken leg. But what the crutch does is just take some of the pressure off your leg to allow your leg the space it needs to heal. And that's how he explained what the medication was doing for me. It was giving my mind the opportunity and the space just to kind of settle and flatten out for a period, and to give me that space I needed to heal. Now for me, that took, I was on the medication for a year, and after that year, I still had another year and a half of therapy that I went to first every week and then every 2 weeks. And I so wish that I had been brave enough to do the therapy 10 years earlier, 15 years earlier, even in high school, to do that work then, because I think there would have been a lot of, like I said, a lot of pain and a lot of bad choices made out of fear and out of anxiety and out of depression that I probably wouldn't have made, as my life unfolded. Again, it's hard to feel regret, because right now I feel like I'm quite happy in the position I'm in. So, look, that's a little bit of my backstory. My concern was that I would ramble on too much about me. I'm not sure if I give it away, but I like talking about myself a lot. So that's always the danger, which is why I need to move on. So these were my warning signs that there was a problem. I only, like I'm hinting at here, I only recognized these signs once I went through therapy, and once I explained what I would do and what I was feeling, and once I processed all of that. Again, I'm not a trained therapist or counselor or mental health support, which is why I always recommend that you go and find someone who has some sort of training and accreditation when you do this. I think it's critical actually for every dad to go to some sort of therapy for some level, for some amount of time. Maybe not 2.5 years, even just a few sessions will be helpful. But okay, let me stay on track here. These were my main warning signs. The first one was work avoidance, and that was in the form of just delaying doing any sort of work, whether it was the simplest task to a very difficult task, even tasks that I knew I could accomplish very quickly. I just could not get myself to do it. Part of that was just that feeling of being completely overwhelmed. It kind of feels like my brain was full all the time, and I didn't have any capacity to add anything else in there. So I would avoid doing the work that I needed to do, whether it was at home or at my actual, employment, which you can imagine causes even more anxiety and stress, because then you're getting pulled into meetings from your boss and your manager asking, why aren't you getting this work done? You're letting your team down, your colleagues down, which again adds to more of it and actually sends you into a bit of a spiral. That definitely happened with me. My irritability increased dramatically over a period of a few years. Things like snapping at my wife and my children over things that, if you took a second, if you took a breath and really ask yourself, wait, why are you so frustrated about this? Is it reasonable to be annoyed at this little thing? You would realize that a reasonable person wouldn't be annoyed at it, or it's okay to be annoyed at it, but not at the level that I was reacting to it. I was definitely less talkative to family, less talkative to my partner, my wife, less talkative to friends. Very, I was one of those people who, like, you would message on WhatsApp to say hi or to check in or to plan a get together. And I would respond like a week later or a few days later when it was too late, because I just, again, similar to the work avoidance, I just felt like I didn't have the capacity to deal with simply replying to a friend's message. I needed constant stimulation. This is something that I still struggle with, to be honest. One of the other things that I was recently diagnosed with was with ADHD. But again, I definitely noticed that when I was in my most anxious periods, I just wanted to block everything out. So I would be watching TV, I'd be scrolling on my phone, I'd be listening to like a podcast or reading a book or playing a computer game or on the PC. Sometimes I'd be doing all of those things at the same time and just getting as much stimulation as possible from all over to just kind of keep the noises in my own head to a minimum and to have something else to focus on. I didn't like being quiet and being still because I was afraid of really what would come out, what would I start thinking about. Whenever I did have those moments when you know, stuck in traffic and you don't like what's on the radio and your mind starts to wander, I never liked what I was thinking. It was not self-affirming in any way, shape, or form. Again, leads me to the next point. I had extremely low self-esteem and I had very dismissive language about myself. I was very quick to call myself an idiot, very quick to think that I was not capable of doing things that I really should be capable of. When there was if there was ever an opportunity to progress at work or to apply for a new position, my first thought would be, oh, they would never hire someone like me to do that. Why would I be capable of doing that? Things like, concepts of worthlessness. I'm not worthy to exist oftentimes. And there were some very dangerous thoughts that were attached to that. I don't bring any value to my family. I don't, what's the point of me being around? I'm so lucky that people want to spend time with me. And it was never idea of, no, it's nice. People like me. People like having me around. I'm a good person. I'm a fun person to be around. I bring all these kinds of value. And definitely the idea that I would have any sort of innate value, just as a human being, would be lost on me. I'm not sure if you remember, I mentioned earlier that I always had this idea that if I walk into the room, I have to be the mood lifter. I have to be the person that makes everyone feel better, because I thought that's the only way that people would value me. One of the big breakthrough moments I had in therapy was literally saying that, was saying, I get so tired having to, I might have a bad day at work, and then when I walk through my front door at home, I have to put on a big smile and be energetic and be happy. And my therapist asked, why? And I said, well, that's because that's what I have to do. And she asked, but why? Why do you have to do that every day? Even if you're not feeling good, you still have to pretend like you're feeling good. And that was the breakdown. All of a sudden, I realized that my idea of what makes me valuable was warped. And actually, I felt incredibly worthless. And that was that led to some very, very dark thoughts, which I don't want to bring those ideas into the space right now. But that was probably one of the scariest concepts for me, that I just didn't value myself as a human being very highly. Finally, I had a loss of appetite and an enjoyment of food. I love food. I currently love food. I used to love food. And when things got really bad, I really didn't eat much. I picked at my food. I didn't really enjoy the food that I was eating. And I lost a lot of weight, to the point where people would start to compliment me about my weight loss, which made me feel very, very good, because finally people are complimenting me. But I knew inside that there was a problem with that. I can't see if there are any questions, but I think we are going to have Q&A later. Is that correct, Natasha? That was for later. So, okay. There are obviously other warning signs that I didn't specifically struggle with, but from speaking to other people who have struggled with their mental health, to other men who struggled with their mental health, and reading up on it quite a bit when I was going through my own journey, these are some of the other warning signs that you might be seeing. People might, your partner might no longer enjoy things they previously enjoyed. I know this is very cliche, but very stereotypical, but your husband used to love golf, used to love spending time with his mates on the golf course, and now he just doesn't do it anymore, and his golf clubs are getting dusty, and he doesn't make an effort to do it. Or whatever the thing that used to bring them joy, if that thing no longer does, that could be a warning sign. Obviously, too much sleep or too little sleep, just can't get out of bed ever, constantly trying to get back to bed, or insomnia, and then again, overeating or undereating. These are all things that there's a regulation problem going on in the minds. And again, I'd like to double emphasize, I'm not a trained therapist, and you probably aren't either. So please don't diagnose yourself or your partner just based on these. But if you or your partner are kind of seeing some of these signs, it's a good idea to get professional help. That's I think, don't go, oh, you definitely have depression or you definitely have anxiety because you have 5 of the 7 symptoms that Terence showed. So therefore, you don't want to do that. You don't want to self-diagnose. But if you or someone you know are showing those signs, it might be time to start to think about getting mental health support. So one of the reasons why I am here on this call today is because I am a man, and I'm one of the, unfortunately, few men who are comfortable about talking about my own mental health and about men's mental health in general. And it's a very difficult subject to broach with men, even for myself. I get a lot of pushback. I get a lot of, no, it's fine. Sometimes I get some worse comments than that. So I think one of the reasons why Natasha asked me to kind of chat through this is to also maybe give advice about wives or partners who have men in their lives, husbands or the fathers of their children who they are concerned about. Someone who's showing some of the symptoms that I spoke about previously, and you want to know, okay, well, how do I help him? How do I broach the subject? How do we get him the help that he needs? Particularly knowing that this is a very sensitive subject for a lot of men. So here are some thoughts that I've had about what was helpful for me and what also wasn't helpful for me, with the way my wife helped me, with the way other people in my life helped me to get the support I needed. The first thing you need to do, and this is particularly directed towards wives, so I'm trying to be as diplomatic when I say this as possible. You need to investigate your own internal beliefs about men's mental health. We are all raised, or have all been raised, in a very patriarchal, misogynistic society that includes women. And that can sometimes mean that a wife might actually hold onto some very patriarchal beliefs about how men should be behaving herself. Do you feel comfortable with seeing men talk about their emotions? Would you feel comfortable with with your partner coming to you and saying, I don't feel okay? Or would you feel that your foundations are being a bit rocky? Or would you feel that he's less of a man? This is one of the spaces where you need to be honest with yourself, because your partner will pick that up very, very quickly, and you could do a lot of damage that way. You have to understand that a lot of men believe that if they start to talk about where they are struggling, their partners will take that on as how it affects them. So they think that if they come to their wife and say, I have depression, that their wife's going to go, oh no, what does it mean for me? What does it mean for my family? What's it going to mean for our work? And she's going to go into a bit of a emotional spin herself. And to avoid that, they just don't speak about that at all. Now, that might or might not be true for you and your particular relationship. But if it is true, that is something that you're going to have to work through too. Because if there is even a hint that him coming to talk to you about his mental health, or the two of you having a conversation about his mental health, if there's a hint that you are going to become emotional yourself, it would send him, it might push him to kind of push those feelings back down. The second thing that was really helpful for me was to talk about mental health and when we talk about physical health. I told you about the thing that my doctor said is that, if you're taking an antidepressant, it's like a crutch for your leg. If for us, it's if you've had the flu, or if you've been sick for more than a few days, you go to the doctor. So if in the same way that if you're not feeling great, if you're feeling anxious for no particular, you're not entirely sure why, or if you're feeling down for a long period, or if you're showing all these negative signs for a long period, then you go to the doctor, or you go to your mental health support, whatever that looks like. It's on the same level. We're not making mental health this like separate and almost having mental health and physical health as two separate things doesn't really make sense. But we need to start to equalize the two of them as much as possible in the way we speak about it. The other things that was helpful is finding examples in our social circles and in our community of men who have received mental health support. One of the useful things for me, that first counselor I went to in my story, he has been a recipient of mental health support, which made it made me feel like I wasn't weak or alone or a weirdo. Okay, there are these people who I look at and recognize as people that I want to be like, or who seem fine. They don't seem weak, which is a big, scary thing for men. So if you can find those examples, that is really useful. That's kind of one of the reasons why I like talking about mental health and men's mental health as much as I do, because I know how useful it was for me to hear it from other men. And I'm hoping that me talking about it, if I can help one guy, that would be great. If I can help 5 guys, who knows? So find those examples in your community. I made a big point that worthlessness was a big issue for me. I think worthlessness is a big issue for men. And I know that might be surprising in the kind of context that we're talking about, but for a lot of men, feeling like the only worth they have is how much they provide, is how much physical provision they can give to their family. You need to remind them that they are worthy just because they're a human, just because they're a people. They are worthy of receiving help. They are worthy of not having to feel like crap. A lot of men walk around feeling really terrible, but also thinking that they either kind of deserve it or it's fine. Men should just feel terrible. When I was told that actually most people or healthy people don't feel terrible all the time, that was a big shock to me. And when I was told that it's okay for me not to feel terrible and to actively do things to not feel terrible anymore, it was such a relief. So as you're having these conversations, needing to remind him that he is worthy of getting help, he's worthy of getting support, he deserves it, because everyone deserves to feel healthy. In the same way that if he was sick with anything else, with a physical ailment, he's worthy of going to a hospital. He is also worthy of getting mental health support. And finally, the big way that you can support your partner is by having a lot of patience. I needed a lot of patience. Like I said, it was a 2.5-year journey to start the process. I'm still in the process. I'm still on this journey. I still have good days and I have bad days. And my partner needs to have a lot of patience with me to help me work through the difficult times and to help me. And she had to have a lot of patience during those specific 2.5 years where I was grappling with a lot of difficult issues about who I am, my self-identity, again, my self-worth, what my goals are for the future. All of those things had to be kind of rejigged in this new light of myself. And there was a lot of patience that was required from her side. Again, if there's a sense of you're taking too much time, you're wasting energy, oh, we're talking about this again, that's very quickly going to put him back in his shell. And it's gonna mean that these conversations are just gonna go right back down where we don't want it. We don't want these things to be hidden away. We want them to be brought to the light, and patience helps with that. That's my last main point. My last slide is just, again, if you or your partner or someone you know wants to talk about this further, I'm happy for you guys to DM me or to send me an email. Obviously, I keep all of these conversations very private. Sometimes you just need someone to talk to who can say, yeah, you need to go get proper help. I'm not going to diagnose you. I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't be feeling, but I am someone that you can talk to. So please feel free to send me a message on any of those platforms. I'm sure we'll share them a lot later on. Yeah, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for spending the time and for joining us and for letting me talk at you for this period. So that is me. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Terence. Absolutely love listening to you chat. You do the whole thing with a huge smile on your face. So much charisma, as I said earlier. And I also think it's great that you share the points to look out for in a man, because everyone thinks depression represents the same to everyone, and in men it can show up very differently than in women. So it's nice for wives or partners to have the perspective to know what else to look out for that's not similar to them. And then also the constant need for stimulation. I think in today's world, you don't even realize that you constantly seeking stimulation and that you want to hide from everything. So it's very good to be mindful of that as you go through day to day. I saw a thing of, you tell me you're too busy for self-care, like to go to the gym, to go for a walk, to do some meditation, but put on the app that counts how many hours you scroll through Facebook, and then tell me how much time you don't have, you know. So yeah. Okay, thanks, Terence. So then our next speaker is Claire, who is coming to us from Inspiring. So Claire, if you can put on your speaker, and then I will put it over to you. And I'll put my share screen on.
Okay, I'll let you know when we're good for that first one.
Okay, I'm just gonna pause. All right. Over to you.
No, thank you. No pressure following after that charismatic Terence. Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here with us. It's really, as Terence said, it's a topic that is, and Tash said, it's a prevalent topic at the moment, and something that often gets pushed aside and is not taken very seriously. So if I repeat a few things that Terence said, bear with me. I'm coming at it from the mom's angle, and then I'll go on to the older kids, sort of school-going and adolescence age. I am the mom of 2 kiddies. My daughter is the same age as your oldest, Terence. She's almost 9, and my son is almost 12. And I will never forget when I went for my 6-week checkup when my daughter was 6 weeks old, and saying to my gynae, "Oh, are those your kiddies in the back?" Kiddies, adult children in the background. And she said yes. And I said, "Oh, wow, it must be so easy now." And she said, "No, little people, little problems, big people, big problems." So that's something that stayed with me, and it is amazing as they get older, the problems get different. I have also suffered with anxiety a couple of times in my life, and in fact very recently, as in this year, in the last couple of months. So I am very aware of how it goes down with me, how it affects everybody around me. And it has been something very passionate about for me. Having run my own play school for the last 10 years, I've seen moms getting into that spiral that Terence spoke about, whether it's because they are tense and anxious or that it's their partner. So yes, I'm also not a doctor. I am a coach, a certified coach, but I'm not a doctor. So I'm going to reiterate what Terence said. I'll only say it the once though, that you do need to get these diagnoses from a certified doctor, please. Okay. So we as women are often innately fixers. We want to make things better. We want to fix the problem. And it can be very difficult when the problem is our partner who's suffering from anxiety, and they really don't want to, or they don't feel that they need to. But it can often feel like our partner's pulling away from us when they're feeling like that. And I think Terence really did focus on that we do deal with these things differently. And we have all very much been brought up in this sense of buck up, just suck it up and get on with it. So it can become very hard when you're trying to mend the bridges and the tension that is there between the two of you. He also highlighted how we are different beasts. And the way we deal with things, specifically emotions, is very different to one another. So I'm going to talk more from the woman's side. And obviously there's overlap, but it's just more about how we suffer and how we deal with things. Anxiety is fluid. It doesn't always look the same. And Terence alluded to the fact how we often put on a brave face because we don't feel we can show that we're feeling anxious. But when we get home, it all falls apart. We shout and we scream. But sometimes we behave in the way that we feel we should be behaving, and we feel we can get up in the morning and we can get on with it. But other days we'll be snappy, we'll be frustrated, we'll be downright miserable. What we need to keep in mind is that this behavior is not personal. It's not an attack on your partner or on your boss or on anybody else. It's a symptom of what we're feeling deep inside. I just want to talk on an overlap with our partners. If you feel that if your husband is or your partner is anxious and you're not coping with it and you are reacting negatively, if they are open to talking about it, and Terence, those tips were really, I have taken them, they really are great to know. But it is a very helpful thing is to go to coaching, whether it's coaching or therapy for yourself or as a couple. Group coaching can really be helpful because you sit in a situation where you hear other people suffering from the same things that you're suffering from. And it makes us feel that actually we're not alone. We're not going crazy, that maybe, okay, there's something in this. And communicating with your partner is absolutely key. So it's great that everybody's here, including me, to get new tips and tricks, because you want to communicate so that you can be more effective and that you can deepen the bond with your partner and with your children. You don't want to let that anxiety stop you from pursuing those promising, beautiful relationships in your family. So it's different when that anxiety is in fact you that's battling with it. A big problem, and this goes for women just as much as for men, is that acknowledgement that I've actually got a problem. And I say problem in inverted commas because I don't mean it in a negative way, but that something isn't right. It's important to practice self-care and empathy. Your cup cannot be half empty. I'm going to refer to an analogy that hopefully most of us have experienced recently or will experience now that COVID's done. But being on an airplane and the air staff start doing the safety talk and they tell you if there's a loss in cabin pressure, masks are going to drop from the panel above you. And please, Lord, let us not have to see another mask ever again. But what they say and what they highlight and reiterate is that you have to put that mask, your mask, on first. If you do not put your mask on first, if you try and help everybody else first, you are not going to get any oxygen. You are going to pass out, you're going to collapse, and then you are of absolutely no help to anybody else. So the same thing goes for you in life, in the broader picture of life, is that you have to make sure that you are looking after your needs, that your mental health, your physical health is where it needs to be. Otherwise, you're not going to be of any use to those people, especially those closest to you. Recognizing anxiety in oneself isn't always easy, nor is it easy to admit it. We as women often want everything to be together and in order. Sorry if you can hear my dog scratching. She's desperate to come and listen to me talking, apparently. So sorry about that. It's important to take a step back and to look carefully at yourself and how you're feeling. Do you wake up with a knot in your stomach and you go to bed with that self-same knot every night? Are you battling to sleep because those same thoughts are going round and around in your head? Do you have sweaty hands and heart palpitations? And the more that you stop yourself trying to feel this way, the more you actually do feel this way. And it becomes this vicious cycle, and these thoughts keep going around and around in your head. It becomes like running on a hamster wheel. You feel completely helpless and you don't know how to get off. And this leads to not being able to think clearly, and then it exacerbates the anxiety. And remember that all our emotions manifest with physical symptoms. And it can cause some very serious health issues: chronic headaches, sore stomachs, irritability. So it's very important to take care of ourselves. Often when we feel anxious about something, we fixate on it. We fixate on the outcome of the events, or even on mundane, routine events. And this in itself can become debilitating. You may feel restless. You have difficulty concentrating. You'll leave things undone, just like Terence said about that. I can't actually get to it, even though I know that it's easier to do it and I can do it, but you just can't get to it. And then there's the worry about the worry. So you're preempting how you're going to feel about the situation, and it becomes this vicious, incapacitating cycle. And the ones who suffer the most from this are those closest to you, because you can become angry, you can become irrational, you start snapping and shouting about everything and anything. And, you know, as we said, and as we all know, anxiety has been this taboo thing. We've got to get on with it. You know, there's nothing wrong. And often to those, even those closest to us, it may seem that we are being irrational. And they'll try to give you all the advice in the world or tell you to get on with it, and that you need to sort it out. And in that moment, you may actually see the rationality in their thinking, or you may want to bite their head off. But it's not about that moment. It's far more deep-rooted. It's like trying to drive your car on square tires. No matter how much you are told that you need to get on with it, or you may even know inside your own head, you're actually stuck. So that's why it's so important to get to the bottom of the anxiety and get it treated, whether through therapy of one form or another, or medication, or both. And just going on to the medication, it's also been a taboo topic. You know, oh no, gosh, no, you can't take medication for this, because why can't you handle it yourself? It's such an old school way of thinking, but you don't have to handle it yourself. There is help out there. And of course, there are so many reasons that we feel anxious. But it's important, again, as I said, to take a step back and to look at yourself and identify and recognize these symptoms, that they aren't the way you should be feeling, that you don't need to struggle with them alone, that there are ways and means and people who are there to help you. And that, yes, you are in fact suffering from anxiety. And there's no shame in this. We live in the most crazy time of this world, and there are so many external factors that come into play and cause so many people to feel anxious. And it's not healthy for you or your family to carry on this way. There's an organization called the South African Stress and Health, SASH, and they did a study where they investigated the lifelong prevalence of common mental disorders. And anxiety disorders were found to be the most prevalent. If you translate this into numbers, it's about 1 in 5 South Africans being affected every year. That is huge. SADAG, which is a South African Depression and Anxiety Organization, I think, also listed that women are twice as likely to suffer from a panic disorder. But we know now from Terence that it happens to men as often without even talking about it. Tash, will you just put on my first slide quickly, please? So with all of these symptoms, and again, I'm going to use my inverted commas because I don't want it to be negative and you just palm it off and say, oh, I've just got another headache. I'll take a Panado. I'll be fine. They really are real symptoms and things you need to look at, and you can become seriously ill. If you are seriously ill, you're not going to be the mom or the partner that your family needs. So you may start withdrawing from your partner. You don't want to be intimate. You don't even want to have a conversation with them. And it can start leading to some serious cracks in that relationship. You may become irritable and snappy, always shouting at your children at the drop of a hat. And we all know, and I'm sure I have seen it, and much to my horror and my dismay when I've shouted at my children for something that really didn't justify that shouting, that they get extremely upset because they can't understand where or what or why this is happening, where it's coming from. And remember that everything in our life is linked, and one thing affects everything else. So as soon as this wheel, it's called the wheel of life, and there are different versions of it with different areas of your life in there, and you can plug in whichever ones you want. And it's an exercise that I do with all my coaching clients in our first session. And I get them to plot out of 1 to 10 where they feel they are in each of those segments. And then you join those segments and see what your wheel looks like. And often it looks very, very disjointed. And trying to ride on wheels that look like that are going to be exceptionally uncomfortable. And, you know, when you're suffering in one area, it's bringing down a whole lot of other areas, and it then makes it even harder to try and get out of there. Thank you, Tash. Never forget how perceptive children are and that they pick up on our emotions. Even if we think we're hiding them, seeing us anxious can in turn make them feel anxious. They don't know what to expect from mom. Is she going to be happy today? Is she going to be carefree? Is she going to be withdrawn and angry? Or is she going to be snapping at us? And then they too may become withdrawn and unhappy. So I'm going to say it again. You have to keep yourself front of mind. You have to take care of yourself first. I know that that's easier said than done. We are busy. We are getting the children ready for school, lunch boxes, etc. But never forget how powerful your mind is. And try and stay, try and find that happiness and that goodness when it comes to your partner, your children. Remember the reasons why you fell in love with that person in the first place. You have to not let yourself get anxious and beat. So I've got a few coping strategies here. If you could put that up, please, Tash. And I said this just now. The first one is acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge that and admit that something is wrong and that you're truly suffering with this. You can't just keep sweeping it under the carpet. If you never acknowledge it, that there's a problem, the next steps are very difficult to follow through with. And then, in fact, you won't even do them. The next thing is that you need to keep physically active. We get told this all the time, but those endorphins that are released from being physically active really do work. And the fresh air that you get all just really does assist in picking you up. The next one, if you do smoke, and I say this with a chuckle because my husband is a smoker. Thankfully, he's not listening right now. But if you do smoke, there is this misconception that smoking calms you down. And I think in the moment it probably does, but it actually does exacerbate the anxiety. And then try and cut back or even quit drinking caffeinated drinks because they do the same thing. They just get us heightened. Use stress management and relaxation techniques, visualization, meditation, yoga. Breath work is a technique that I use in my coaching. It's harnessing your breath to ground you and get you back to where you need to be. Make sleep a priority, and this is often difficult. If you're not sleeping, you need to get help from your doctor because when we're exhausted, we cannot see anything clearly or rationally. Try and eat as healthily as you can, looking after that body. Learn more about anxiety, and I think Terence touched on this as well. It is a massive topic, and the more you're informed about it, the more prepared and armed you are to deal with it. Try and stick to this treatment plan. Put something in place. Consistency is key. If you just stop doing it the minute you feel that you're on top of it or you're better, you are just going to fall back into where you were before. So you need to actually carry on until you're 150% on top of it and beyond. Try and identify the triggers. Once you know what triggers your anxiety, you can try and steer clear of these things or work out how to reframe them so that they no longer trigger you. Maybe keep a diary. Can track when you're feeling most anxious, when you're feeling at your best, and trying to take advantage of those times when you feel at your best, and try and get that to be the majority of your time whilst working on ways of eliminating the time that you feel at your worst. The next one is slightly ironic. Socialize. Withdrawing and spending too much time on your own is remedy for disaster. And Terence, I keep referring back to you, but there's a lot of overlap here. Our inner voice is our worst critic and our meanest tormentor. You've got to get out of that space because the more you stay in that space, the lower you go, it's going to pull you. But you don't always feel like socializing when you're feeling in this anxious, depressive state. You've got to try and force yourself, because even with small amounts at a time until you feel comfortable being in a broader circle, but you will probably derive energy from those around you and hopefully feel better. There's a movement called grounding, which refers to us becoming one with the earth again. We've lost that. We wear shoes all the time. We don't spend time outside with nature, and nature has an incredible healing power. So grounding is about lying on the grass, feeling the grass in your hands, playing with mud, just standing on the earth with bare feet and just being one with nature once again. Nobody wants to be anxious, feeling like everything is hard and scary. It affects those closest to us, sometimes in ways that we can see and other times not. Children, no matter their age, don't understand why we feel and act the way we do, and they often interpret our behavior as a reflection on them and that they may have done something wrong. So take the steps to get to the bottom of your anxiety so that you can be the best mom that you know you can be to your kids and the best partner. Okay, I'm going to quickly just go on to children of school-going age and the effects that anxiety has on them. Thanks, Tash. I'm done with that slide. One of my mantras, and something I've tried to instill in my children from the get-go, and which I don't want to sound arrogant, but I feel I'm quite good at, is communication. And I truly believe that communication is key with you and your partner and with your children. Try from when they're very little to instill an environment of open communication. They hear their parents arguing and their little minds go into overdrive. They need to know what's going on. If they don't, they form their own story in their heads, and this may often be far worse than what's actually going on. So give them the brief facts, enough to let them know that it's okay, and to understand that everything's going to be all right, and then they don't form those stories in their own heads, and they know that it's going to work out. Children are experiencing levels of anxiety that have never been seen before. It really is, it's quite scary to see, and it's for a number of reasons. Obviously exacerbated by what was our norm for the last 2 years. Parents are stressed out because of money, environmental issues, and it comes home. And even when we feel like we're keeping things positive, they pick up on it. But they have their own stresses because they're going to school and they're hearing people talk about things. Somebody's mom may have lost their job or whatever it may be, and this starts to affect them. We have to remember that there is going to be some level of stress and anxiety when it comes to starting things like a new school, writing exams, or first crush, having to give a speech. Those are normal. That's normal. But when it affects their behavior, when it encroaches on them being children, and when it becomes the only thing that they can focus on, then it is a serious problem. When you look at your child, if you see that they are excessively worried, they are not sleeping, they have irrational fears, which seem irrational to us, but to them are very real, and a whole lot of other symptoms, again, these could very well be indications that they may be suffering with anxiety. As a start, we need to try and look at the positives and help them focus on the positives. And don't forget to let them know how much you love them, how proud of them you are, and how you are always there for them. I often see parents putting their anxiety onto children, projecting onto their children. Your child doesn't get into the sports team. They may not even notice. They're just so excited to go to practice, but you feel that they've been shortchanged or they're missing out. You get told that your child has remedial requirements and they have to change schools. You feel so desperate for them. Nobody wants their child to struggle. But again, they're adaptable, and being in an environment with other children that learn the same way as they do will probably be the best thing for them, both academically and emotionally. So we have to be very careful not to make our concerns and our worries our children. And I saw this often in my play school. You know, little kiddies specifically a lot of them are quite carefree and they're happy to come to a new school. And I'd often say that to the moms that they were actually going to be more emotional than the children. But if your kids see you anxious and emotional when you're dropping them off at school, they pick up on that and then they think, oh my goodness, it's not safe for me to go here. And then they too start crying. So it was often for me about coaching those moms through the fact that the kids would be all right. And if they weren't all right, I promised to let them know. There's an American psychologist called Anne Marie Albano. She's been studying children for the last 30 years. And just like those other studies that I spoke about earlier, she's established that the most common psychiatric disorder in young people and children is anxiety. And it's very scary because it can start at the age of 4, and Tash, I know, is going to go into those younger years. In the States, obviously it's an American study, but she said by adolescence, 1 in 12 youths are severely impaired by their ability to function at home, in school, with their peers. And it can become very serious. So those dark thoughts that Terence spoke about, in these children, they can become so frightened and worried that it literally feels uncomfortable and difficult for them to pay attention, to make friends, and they're not behaving and doing the things that kids should be doing. And there are some extreme cases where it goes even further than that, drugs and suicide. And it's not pretty, but it's very real. It can become so intense that it almost mutates and it spreads. And there have been cases where children have suffered from more than one anxiety condition at a time. And I mean, just me saying that, and I know this, but just saying it again is absolutely heartbreaking, because these poor children should not have to suffer like this. It's understandable that often it's ignored, or no, it's not that, because we don't want to admit that our children are suffering. It's disconcerting, it's difficult to deal with. But we have to deal with it, because if it's left untreated, it can lead to even more severe mental disorders like depression. So I don't mean to terrify you, but we all know that it's a real problem. That's why you're here. And we are our children's advocates. We naturally want to do what's best for them and set them up for a healthy, productive adulthood. So we need to be aware of these symptoms and act on them, and also act in the favor of our children. But we don't want to wrap them in cotton wool. Too often these days, well-meaning parents, and they really are well-meaning, they're doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, but they perpetuate the problem because they're too quick to let their children give in. They make too many accommodations for their child. They let their children out of challenging situations without even trying. So as an example, I worked with the parents of a 7-year-old child last year who was put into the grade 1, first grade of primary school, and she didn't particularly like one of the girls who was there with her. It was a friend from the nursery school, but she didn't particularly like her. So she asked her mum after the first term if she could please be moved to another class. If her mother had gone to the teachers and said, "I'd like my child moved," and it had been given as an option, that child would only be learning that every time she didn't like something, she could just say as much and her mother would move her somewhere else. And she wouldn't have learned the skills and the coping mechanisms to deal with the situation and make it better for herself. Growing up means facing new challenges. But for some kids, these uncertain situations lead to anxiety that parents often seek to soothe. They're constantly trying to make sure that their child's happy, that their child always succeeds, that they never experience disappointment. But this can have the opposite effect, because it perpetuates a lifelong cycle of dependence and resentment. So research has shown that a healthy dose of risk, and I'm not talking about jumping off a building here, people, I'm just talking about trying out things that scare them, but a healthy dose of risk helps cultivate that lasting confidence in them. So when it comes to school-going age and young adolescents, the challenging situations are, there's a plethora of them. Sleepovers, are they allowed to go for a sleepover with friends? They get their report home at the end of the term. Do they want to show mom? Don't they want to show mom? So they're trying out for a new team. And along with that comes some degree of risk. Children with anxiety don't take risks, and they don't engage. So they don't learn to manage these situations. And like with most things in life, coping skills in children develop with repeated exposure to everyday situations that they encounter. So learning things like self-soothing skills, which is the ability to calm yourself down when you're upset, learning problem-solving skills, conflict resolution, delayed gratification, having to actually wait for that prize or whatever it is. They're developing in children who are taking risks and engaging all the time. And so does self-efficacy, which is the belief in oneself and that you can overcome challenging situations. Children who suffer from anxiety and get others to do the scary things for them will probably become more anxious over time and less confident in themselves. They begin to think and then believe that they're incapable of doing things. And they need other people, such as their parents, to do these things for them. I tell children that I coach that they have to remember their parents can't go into a test for them or an exam and write it for them. So therefore, their parents can't study for them. They've got to study, they've got to prepare for themselves. And then work out ways to deal with that anxiety when it comes to that test or that exam. We do all we can to prepare our children for life. And on their first day of primary school, they sit down next to a child who's grown up without rules, without boundaries, a child who doesn't know respect or love, is a downright bully. You aren't there to fix it for your child or take your child out of that situation. You have to believe and trust that you've given your child the skills and the grounding to know how to handle themselves and make the best decisions. And obviously be there to listen when they come home and talk about it and work out ways to carry on dealing with that. If you can help them to confront their fears and problem solve, it'll result in a bigger chance that they'll develop their own internal coping mechanisms and managing their anxiety. We need to be mindful in the moment as their parents and think about our reactions to our child's anxiety. I'd like you to just try and exercise the next time you feel that your child's in an anxiety-inducing situation. First of all, look at the situation and ask, what is the situation at hand? How threatening is it to my child? And what do I ultimately want them to learn from it? Please don't get me wrong, I'm not downplaying this at all. You have to listen very closely and attentively to your child. And if they are in a situation that is unsafe, where they've been bullied, where they're in harm's way, you are most definitely to intervene as early as possible. In everyday situations where they may be getting anxious because they've got a test, etc., you are more help to your child if you remain calm, warm, and matter of fact. Don't get into that spiral, and it's the same with your partner, like Terence mentioned. The spiral that you get into is not going to help them in any way. Validate their feelings, absolutely. I can see that you're looking scared. I can see that how are you feeling? What's going on? But then help them and assist them in planning how they are going to manage the situation. And then key after that is helping them deal with the situation themselves. It's heartbreaking to watch your child suffer, no matter how old they are. You want to swoop in, you want to fix the situation, you want to remove them from the distress, whether they're young or old. Unfortunately, anxiety leads us to overestimate the risk and the distress while underestimating our ability to cope with it. So we don't want to overprotect our children. Again, I'm going to say it again, we have to be their advocate. We want to help them build these skills. And both children and parents and adults can learn that calmness and confidence aren't just emotions, but they are coping skills too. And going back to what I said about when we're feeling anxious ourselves, very difficult to keep calm and confident when we ourselves are feeling anxious. So just a couple of coping mechanisms for children, which is my last slide. Remind them of the beauty that is all around them. There is an artist called Sierra Hull, and she plays this song, and I'm going to include it on my PDF. It's a beautiful song that she plays on her mandolin, and she sings her original song that's reminding her that even amid fear and anxiety, you can still find beauty. It really is a lovely little song. So try and encourage them to look around for the things that they do love, that they feel good about. Then remind them that you believe in them. Children very often don't believe in themselves. If they don't get the right results or they don't get into the team, that self-talk comes into them too. So remind them that you believe in them. Mental health days. So this goes back to, sorry if I'm sounding like a stuck record mentioning Terence again, but when he talked about the medication, the mental medication being the crutch for your broken leg, we do have to treat our mental health like our physical health. So just because you're having an off day doesn't mean you have to back up and get on with it. The body needs to be taken care of just as much as the brain. I mean, the brain, sorry, needs to be taken care of just as much as the body does. And I found on some research I was doing, I found something really interesting. In Oregon, in the US, they've actually passed a bill that allows children to take mental health days just as they would sick days. So in a 3-month period, they'll get 5 days off for either mental health or for physical illness. All that the school require is that the parents actually call it in to legitimize that it is mental health day, which I think we could all do with here. I must confess that I do allow my children to have a duvet day every now and again, because they do need it. So let them know that it's always okay not to be okay, and you can and you should take a break. They don't have to feel pressure to be like everybody else. This keeping up with the Joneses puts an immense amount of pressure on our children. So embrace their uniqueness. Tell them about it, how you accept them for who they are. You love them unconditionally for every quirk, for every craziness, for every freckle, whatever it may be. Every child has got their own strengths, their own quirky personality, their own talents. So don't fall into the trap of wanting them to be like everybody else. The pressure that they live under from everywhere else and expectations just induces anxiety. So love them for who they are. Support them and work out problem-solving techniques. So if you can grow and nurture an environment of support, so not telling them to just suck it up, but acknowledge how they're feeling, it's going to help them a lot. So whatever it is that's coming up and making them feel anxious, try and prepare them by giving them as much information as you can. If they're going on a camp or a sleep out, or show them where, or tell them where it's going to be, tell them who's going to be there. Just prep them so that they feel less anxious, and reassure them that you are there to help, that they, if it's a sleepover and your kid says, oh, I want to go, and 5 minutes in phones you and says, I'm not so happy here anymore, you go and fetch them, because you want them to know that it's okay. Share your concerns. We have to talk about these things with our friends, with our families, with our counselors, and you're going to encourage your children to chat about it too to their close friends, so they don't feel like they have to keep it a secret. Keeping it a secret just makes it bigger and more scary. So, and as I said earlier about how group coaching works so efficiently, because you hear that other people are suffering from the same problems, and then you don't feel like you're crazy and you're all alone. This goes back to that whole thing of saying that you have to address your anxiety first. If there are other people, whether it's your partner, whether it's you, you have to sort out that anxiety and get that under wraps, because children are perceptive and they pick up on that. And anxious children are often more sensitive to the emotions of others. So they're going to feel those emotions of mom and dad if you are stressed and you are anxious. So you do whatever needs to be done to deal with that. Don't isolate anybody. It's not a bad thing to be feeling like this. They don't have to be tormented and feel like they've got leprosy or anything awful. It's just about acknowledging it and working out ways to get through it. Yoga, meditation, breathing are all the same as I said for the moms. They are so good for kids. Mindfulness, so practicing them to focus on the present moment and quiet their anxious thoughts, is really, really effective. And breathing. Children really do benefit from these, and get them to do it 5 minutes in the morning, every morning. Just get them to sit quietly still on their bed and just breathe and just be mindful of the moment that they're in. Same as parents, eat healthily, get lots of exercise. This is a whole topic on its own, limit screen time, because it really is something that we know. It's a big, big beast. I'm going to stop there, but especially before bed. If they are wired because they've been on their screen just before bed, they are not going to have a good sleep. And the last one is that sleep is absolutely imperative. They need to be getting enough sleep. Kids can be taught strategies to help them overcome their anxious minds. Maybe frustrating at times, but we need to walk alongside them in their journey. The society that we've grown up in, it's changing, but maybe not fast enough, but it promotes everyone falling in line and behaving the same. But your child isn't everyone else. They're unique, they're beautiful, and you need to guide them on their own path of individuality. So let's help grow and raise resilient and capable adults who can cope when we're not around, so that we can set them free to soar to great heights. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. And I think it's valuable to remember the influence we have as parents. Our children are watching us in everything that we do. I mean, they learn to talk from us, they learn to walk while watching us. And I think the way we handle our mental health is the way that they will eventually handle it as they grow up. So if we make self-care the norm, for them it'll be something that's how it is. I need to look after my mind. I need to look after my mental health. So I just implore you all to remember how important it is, how you demonstrate your respect for your mental health in front of your children. But thanks, Claire. Okay, so now it's my turn. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly. Just give me 5 seconds. Yeah. Hang on. Okay, here we go. Okay, can you see my screen? Great. Okay. All right, so my name is Natasha Fremantle, and I am a qualified children's yoga instructor. That's what started me on my mental health journey with children. And I also have a bachelor's degree in child psychology. I decided to run this webinar because I noticed more and more parents around me were under extreme stress, and the anxiety this caused was translating into emotional outbursts at their children. I've experienced it myself, and it's not a pleasant space to be in. Yes, children are challenging and do misbehave, but when we ourselves are at our wits' end, the child's actions tend not to justify our reaction. And guess what? You're human, it's going to happen. So the talk I'm going to give you today is just one, how you react can minimize your own anxiety, and then how you can help your own child. So what I want to share with you today is one preventative tool and one corrective tool. So that when used consistently, you will leave your household a lot calmer and happier, and your children on a path to better emotional intelligence. So what I want to make one note here is, please remember that what I'm speaking about tonight, I say the word consistently. So it's not an overnight fix. We are dealing with children's brains and learned behavior. It takes time. I want you to imagine going for a walk every day in a nature reserve. There's no path. You walk through the tall grass and over rocks and stones, and the first few steps and trips are not easy, and they take a lot longer. But as you repeat this journey over time, it becomes easier and quicker because you're slowly creating a clear, defined path. Yours and your child's brain works just like this. To change current behavior or create new behaviors, you need to rewire the brain, so the neural pathways have to be ignited repeatedly for them to form clear and ingrained path that allows an action to become automatic. So it's kind of like learning how to drive. The first time you tried to drive a car, it was an absolute nightmare, and you had to make a conscious effort to remember every single step. Now, sometimes you don't even remember how you got to the place you were going because you just drove, and it's just, or your brain automatically knows how to do it. Okay, so first off, I'm going to do the preventative tool. What I want you to remember here is this. When you find yourself repeating to your child, "You are not listening to me," I want you to take a moment and think about this. Who is in fact the person that is not listening? And if you, after this, you might think back and actually realize that more often than not, it is the parent, you, who are not listening to your child. your child does not possess the language skills or emotional intelligence to self-regulate. This is something they look to you, and like constantly learning new terminology and how to label how they are feeling. So by having a tantrum, screaming, fighting, withdrawing, whatever their tactic is, they are actually asking you for help. So they want help to manage the big feelings they are having. So the sooner you meet this need and listen to them, the sooner you can calm the situation and move forward. So just to make things easier to understand, I just want you to bear with me and close your eyes and imagine this scenario. You come home from work and it's been a really taxing day. And ahead of you, you have cooking, feeding, bathing. And if you're lucky, you do it all in the dark right now. And then if you're even luckier, the lights will come on by the time the kids go to bed, and then you'll have some quiet time for yourself. Or for a lot of people, the norm is to get back to work because you have so much to do by tomorrow. So as you walk through the door, you put your stuff down, and no sooner have you said hello, and you are met with a younger child bashing down your older child's enormous Lego tower that they have so patiently built and are so proud of. So the older child starts screaming and throwing the Lego blocks. One way the scenario can play out is like this, and I think this is with parents that are highly stressed or just generally stressed like we are today, is probably the norm. I've been part of it, I've seen it, it's just like we're human, it happens. So you reach your limit and you shout at the youngest child for smashing the tower. So they start crying. And then you start off in a low tone, telling the oldest child who's already crying to calm down and rationalizing with him, it was a mistake. Your sister's still very young. She just wants to play with you. Just calm down. But he continues to shout and cry. So you raise your voice again saying, just calm down. We'll sort it out. But this time you're saying it a little bit louder, and your anxiety is growing a little bit deeper and deeper. And slowly the conversation just keeps going in that circle, and every person just keeps elevating the level of their voice. So it ends up being a screaming match. So your child gets even more frustrated by this and throws Lego at you and their sibling. And this literally pushes you over the edge, and you send them to time out and you walk away and carry on. So I'm sure you can identify with this kind of scenario. So if we look at that household now, we have 3 upset individuals. The mother's stress levels are beyond what she came home with, and she now has to add, or she will naturally add, guilt to her list of emotions because she feels bad about letting her emotions get the better of her. And now she has to go and reconcile with both children, and this will take extra time, adding more to her to-do list in the evening. And if you are like me and you have a very headstrong child who's very sure of themselves, this reconciling moment can take quite a long time. But what I can tell you is that it does not have to happen like this. This kind of situation can be extinguished relatively quickly so that everyone is calm and can carry on into the evening in a nice and peaceful fashion. Oh. Sorry, slippery fingers. Okay. Let's understand this situation from the point of view of your child's brain. Okay, so first understand the part of our brain that reacts to something unpleasant is very underdeveloped. They still refer to it as the reptile brain. So it still operates as if you were back in the days of the caveman. So if you think about back then, you came across a saber-toothed tiger, your brain instantly went into survival mode and chose either fight, flight, or freeze. Today, thankfully, we no longer have to worry about things like saber-toothed tigers, but any instance that causes you or your child stress is interpreted by your brain as something as life-threatening as a saber-toothed tiger. So we go into survival mode and we either fight, flight, or freeze. As adults, we can rationalize and tell ourselves we're okay, and it's actually not that big a deal, and we take the appropriate action. But for children, the part of the brain that applies rational and logical thought is still developing and will only develop by the age of 25, like fully developed. So any stress for them feels like life-threatening, a life-threatening event, and they will respond as such. So you can see here the different parts of the brain. So the bottom part develops first, and that's where you have your fight, flight, freeze, your response to survival, like everything that's going to keep you alive. Then you have your emotional section, and then the last, which is your prefrontal cortex, which I said will develop by 25, and that's where your rational thought, your logic, all resides there. So your children can't access that quite so easily now, and that is why they have tantrums, meltdowns, and that kind of thing. So here, I just want to show you how fight, flight, freeze translates into your child's behavior. So fighting would be your child yelling, screaming, using mean words. I know my kid's favorite one is to tell me they hate me and I'm the worst person in the whole world because I wouldn't buy a toy. And I make them so unhappy. Then there's hitting, kicking, biting, aggression. And then flight would be running away, having a lack of attention, restlessness, being scared, avoiding the situation. And then freeze, going blank, isolating themselves, answering every question with, I don't know. And then daydreaming, being depressed, or just having a lack of energy. I find understanding this about our children is a parenting game changer. It helps us understand that tantrums, meltdowns, challenging behavior are all ways of asking us for help on how to self-regulate. They are not trying to manipulate you or push you over the edge. Obviously, as your child gets older, you will know them. You will know when they are doing things because they literally cannot handle their emotions, or when they're actually okay and they are trying to like gyp the system to get what they want. But when they're very young, they do not possess the skills for that rational thought, that decision making that will allow them to manipulate you. It's purely communication with you, asking for help, because something as small as an irritating label on their shirt triggers their brain to be like, you're in danger, you're not safe, you're either going to fight, flight, freeze. So like for a sensory child, that label will mean the end of the world, meltdown. So it's valuable to know what your child finds like in clothing, what they find comfortable, if they are sensory, if they're not. That was a big game changer for me. Okay, so in this case, having the tower knocked down was the first threat that the child had and elicited shouting, the fight response. Then the parents shouting added a further threat, increasing the survival response and escalating it to throwing and hitting. What is also happening here is that the person who is usually the child's safe space, which is you, the parent, in shouting back at them while they are in a moment of fear, you have now become another perceived threat. And your child will find this difficult to process because you're supposed to be their safe space, but you're also the threat. So what do? And over time, this can actually create changes in the development of your child's brain if it happens persistently, as it causes disorganization. And then if we send our child to time out, you think you're punishing them, but you're actually sending them to sit in a room with all these emotions which they've been trying to ask you for help with, and you're sending them to their room to deal with them, but they do not possess the tools yet on how to deal with them. So they actually just end up being alone and no one achieves anything. Okay, and then, so let's revisit that same situation, but this time with the recommended preventative approach. Okay, so we're going to fast forward to when the siblings smash the tower down. You can feel you have reached your limit and your anger and lack of patience is about to present itself. First and foremost, stop for a second and just breathe. You want to bring calm to the situation and not add fuel to the fire. So you're going to attend to the child who has been wronged first. I think we've all seen that meme that said, never in the history of calming down has anyone ever calmed down by being told to calm down. So this applies to children as much as it does to adults. They are now in survival mode. All of their blood is running the oxygen to the part of the brain that is about survival. So they are not going to hear you. They are purely trying to get themselves back into a safe space. So instead of saying calm down, followed by a rational explanation of why they shouldn't be feeling the way they are, I think I would like to recommend that you try rather getting down to their level so that you're talking to them eye to eye, because if you're coming from above them, then it's a position of power and it's like also like a perceived threat. You're going to come down to their level, still maintaining your calm, and you're going to see, I see your sister knock down your tower. And then you're going to validate their feelings. I can see this is very frustrating for you and has upset you. So we want to calm them down. So I like to do 5-finger breathing with my kids in kids yoga and with my son. So just a quick demonstration. Let me just come in here. So you're going to put your hand up, and then I like to call it the magic superpower. You've got your magic finger, and as you go up your finger, you breathe in and out, down, and then you repeat that going up and down all the fingers until the end. And by then, it's actually quite amazing to see the change it has. Otherwise, if they are young, you can do blow out your angry feelings. So you can hold up your hand or they can hold up their hand, and you're going to breathe in and blow out the angry man, and breathe in and blow out the sad, whatever it is. You decide like how you will connect with your child and blow them out, and you do 5 breaths like that. Just to bring...
Tash, sorry, can I just interrupt you? You keep freezing and breaking up.
Sorry, I think it's our internet connection with coming back on to power. Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yeah, you're much better now. Much better.
Okay, sorry about that. So if you can practice some breathing techniques with them, just to bring them back to a space of calm. And then you can bring in your rational thought and logical reason. So you're going to offer them logical reason for their siblings' behavior. Like your sister just wants to play with you. She gets frustrated and knocked down your tower just because she wanted to be spending time with you. And then you offer them a solution. Something like, would you like to rebuild your tower and see just how high you can get it? And if you and your sister work together, maybe you can create just as big a tower as your last one, but in a shorter time. Or you can offer an alternative, or you and your sister and I could pack up the blocks and you can play something else. In the early stages of implementing this approach, you'll probably find your child is still wanting to fight or withdraw and won't answer on which option they prefer. In this case, you can decide for them, saying, okay, let's rather tidy up, and you can each play something else. So you're still offering boundaries while helping them work towards a solution. So the preventative summary goes, check in on your emotions. If you need to calm yourself first, do so. Take a few breaths. 2, approach the child at their level. Explain the situation as they would see it so that they feel seen. Label the emotions so they can learn the name for each of their feelings. Then offer a calming strategy such as breathing or a hug. And only once they have calmed down, offer reasoning solutions. And so this is my whole attempt to trying to reduce challenging behavior in your house so that it keeps the parents' anxiety to a minimum. because when you are calm, your family is calm. Okay, then we have the corrective measure. I just want to play this little video for you. So I'm talking about correction in times where your emotions get the better of you and you lash out at your child for something insignificant or for something that is natural child behavior. We all do it when our feelings run over and we just are under too much pressure. But afterward, we all know the feeling of failure and shame that follows this. You will say, I shouldn't have reacted like that. They're just children. They don't understand. And it just takes you on a downward spiral. So I just want to show you a way to flip your thinking on that, just so you can be a bit kinder to yourself and also use your bad days as teaching moments for your children. So for this, I'm going to use the example of spilt juice. And I like this saying. It says, a physical mess is a lot easier and quicker to clean up than an emotional mess. So before you lose your mind about something as simple as spilling some juice, just be mindful of once you start shouting, it's going to take a lot longer to sort out the situation of a child having a cry and an upset because you've hurt their feelings or however it is they interpret that. So I just wanted to show you this very cute video. Hopefully you can all see and hear. Okay. Okay, so in that instance, the parent is obviously very relaxed and finds the whole thing very cute. But I'm sure we've all been in the situation where we would have lost our mind after the first or maybe the second one. Okay. So now the next scenario. Close your eyes and imagine this one. You're rushing to get everyone out the house, solo parenting, you're packing bags, locking up, mentally ticking off everything you need to take with you while watching the clock. In this moment, your child spills their juice on the floor. Spilling is something children do. They are still learning their fine and gross motor skills, and we know that these things just happen. It's not planned or done on purpose. But we've all been in that high stress situation. And when the spilt juice turns into your emotions spilling right over, you shout and reprimand and probably utter a few undesirable words under your breath. So you clean up, your emotions have spilled out onto your child who's now also upset, and all of you and the black cloud that has been manifested pile into the car and off you go. The whole way there, you give yourself a talk about what kind of parent are you? They are just children. My response was way over the top. I'm sure you all can identify with that. But what if I told you that your emotional outburst can be used for good, for the growth of your child's emotional intelligence? There are ways you can put this behind you, replacing the negative self-talk with a pat on your back for teaching your child and getting them one step closer to being able to self-regulate. During or after the outburst, or whenever it is your rational brain is able to calm your fight, flight, freeze, you can stop yourself, take a deep breath, and rather have this conversation with your child. I'm very sorry for shouting at you about spilling your juice. I know it was just a mistake. Mommy is just having some big feelings at the moment because I'm trying to get us to the party on time and there's a lot to do. What I'm going to do to calm myself is take a few big breaths to calm my brain and my big feelings, and then we can clean up the mess together and get on our way. What do you think of also maybe next time putting your cup further in on the table so it can't fall off so easily next time? So you'll see in the situation, you have acknowledged your feelings and why you had that outburst, showing them that it's not them, it's actually you. And you label your emotions. You say, oh, I got very angry right then because I was feeling rushed. And if you're, depending on the age of your child, you'll obviously use words that correlate to that. And then you've also shown how you self-regulate. I'm going to take a few breaths to calm down. So by doing that, you show them, once you, even I as a parent, when I have big feelings, I also need to take a few deep breaths, and that's what I'm going to do now, and then we can move forward. And then you've also shown them that adults, like children, have moments where their emotions get the better of them, and that's okay. It doesn't make them a bad person. It's just part of who we are as people. And then I want you to remember that there are many opportunities for you to demonstrate self-regulation and teach your child the labels that accompany various emotions. Some examples would be in traffic when you're on the way to school. Instead of sitting there and swearing at the guys in the traffic and flipping some digits or whatever it is that you do when you're a bit anxious about being late, check yourself, check your emotions, and then say out loud to your children, wow, guys, this traffic is making me feel very anxious because we're going to be late. But guess what? I can't do anything about the traffic. So I'm just going to take a few big breaths and calm myself down so it doesn't feel as hard. Or our new favorite, load shedding. You can say to your children, gosh, not having any power is making me so angry. Does it make you angry? I think while we wait for it to come back on, let's go run around the garden and get our angry energy out. So there you can see there's also acknowledging what type of energy you need to get rid of. So when you're angry, you need physical energy. So you're going to go outside and run. If it's more of a calm situation, then breathing will suffice. And then another example, dad is late, granny is late, or your nanny is late. You can say to them, I'm feeling quite frustrated that we have to wait. I think I will use this time we have to rather play a fun game or read a book, and that will make me feel calmer. So it's just constantly you demonstrating how to deal with your emotions, labeling your emotions, so they become more emotionally intelligent and more able to identify how they're feeling and when they should be checking out, when they should be implementing something to help calm themselves down. The screen share is going to drive me nuts. Okay. We all know parenting is hard, but it can be made a lot easier with just a few small persistent changes. I hope these two tactics have been helpful to you and that you will give them a chance to make a difference in your home. Just remember that, sorry, just leaving the screen share. So just remember, yeah, I'm gonna take a breath. I'm feeling a bit angry right now with my screen share, so I'm just gonna take a few deep breaths. So I hope these two tactics sound helpful to you and that you will give them a chance to make a difference in your home. Just remember, as I said at the beginning, consistency and patience and a lot of checking in on your own emotions are key to its success. And the more mentally healthy we are as parents, the more likely our children are to grow up emotionally intelligent and valuing their own mental health. And that is me. So if you have anyone with some questions, then please pop some questions in the chat and then we can answer. And then, as I said in the email, we'll send out this recording, and then some of the speakers have some offerings for you, but that'll all be in an email sent tomorrow. Cassie, we have 2 questions. So Terence, this one is for you. What if you can see the signs in your partner, but he can't? How do you assure him that it's okay to seek help when seeking help goes against everything he believes in? I think this is a very pertinent question for South African men who refuse.
Yeah. Very much. That's a very good question. I think the first thing would be, like you were saying now, Natasha, it's like it's finding the right time to have the conversation is also very important. Like, you don't have the conversation with him when he's having a panic attack or when he's displaying really severe symptoms for whatever he's going through, finding a calm moment to have that conversation is the first thing. I think, again, referring to what you were saying about potentially feeling attacked. I know we were talking about that in terms of children, but this can also work for your husband as well. Making sure that it's clear that you are there to support him. You're not criticizing him. You're not saying that he's less than because of this. This isn't necessarily you pointing out where he's doing something wrong. You are there because you are worried about him and you want him to feel better. You're not necessarily trying to just be there just for your own needs. So I think that's important too, that you are there as a support. You're talking to him as someone who cares about him, not just the fact that he has these he's showing these symptoms that could actually have a negative effect on you and your family as well. I would also ask him, once you've done all of that kind of background work, what is the thing that's stopping him from getting help and support? Like, what is the actual belief? Because that will affect how you go forward from there. Is it that he feels that men who go to therapy are weak? Is it because he has no idea where to even get a therapist? Is it because he's maybe worried about the finances that are involved with getting any sort of mental health support? Is it that he's so overwhelmed that the idea of going and getting help is just another burden that he can't even get his brain to access that? Those all have different strategies from there. I do want to make it clear, though, that you are not responsible for your partner's mental health. They have to take that job themselves. So yes, you can be support. Yes, you can guide. Yes, you can maybe help them see things that they might not be seeing because they're experiencing it. But ultimately, you can't pick him up and put him in the therapist's chair and make him talk and make him open up. And even if you could, it wouldn't be helpful, and ultimately that's not something that you can be responsible for. So the thing that's also kind of unspoken about men's mental health is that it can have a very negative effect and have very bad consequences for their partners and their families. So if you feel unsafe, if you're like, this man needs help because I feel unsafe for my children, then you need to look after yourself and your children first before you look after your partner. Which I think is kind of strange for a man to be saying this, because surely I should be saying support the man. Definitely support the man, but not at the risk of yourself or even for your own mental health. So you're responsible for your mental health, like Natasha's saying, for your children's mental health, but you're not responsible for your husband's mental health. That's the first thoughts on top of my head.
Yeah. Yes, all about communication. You have offering the opportunity, opening the door and making them know that it's a safe space for them to chat to you about it. And also, like you say, in the right time. Okay, thanks, Terence. And then, what is the best way to deal with your child's destructive behavior? Well, I think I covered a lot of it in the chat, in my talk, just the ways to address it. But I think also you also have to take a step back and look at the reasons for your child's, if it's repeated, what is the actual reason for your child's behavior? So people normally don't look at basic needs, like is your child, are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they sensory? Like I said with my son, like I would like to dress him warmly, but he will, and then I put 2 long shirts on him. I did not realize until we had this discussion that it makes him so uncomfortable. He makes him so anxious because when he goes to school, it's hard for him to wash his hands without getting everything wet. So you need to slowly pick away at the behavior and talk to your child and say, I've noticed this. Would you like to talk about it? For me personally, I like to use bedtime when the lights are off and we just sit and chat and I just let the conversation roll. And I find my son will just open up naturally about things. And the more we've done it, the more he's like tended to open up about stuff. And if you offer that space of listening and no judgment and just saying, oh, how did that make you feel? And, you know, I've had that same, and this is how it made me feel. Then you can slowly start to see what are the things that are bugging your child, and not like the surface things like, oh, someone stole a toy. And then he has a massive meltdown about that, because there might actually be some much bigger issue playing at the back of that. But yeah, there's a whole lot more you could say about children's mental health and the way their brains work, but watch this space. Hopefully I will have some stuff for you soon. So do you think our older generation, being 40-something, suffer more from anxiety nowadays because our parents' generation never addressed it properly or with medication, or is it our busy lifestyles? Who would like to take that one? Claire, would you like to jump in there, or Terence?
Sure. I'll jump in quickly and then Terence can. Hello, Dave. I think it's a bit of both. And I think your first point talking about our parents, they absolutely didn't face it. They absolutely didn't. It was never a problem. It was you get on with it, you know, you being nampy-pampy or whatever it was. And that has definitely had an effect on that. It's also had an effect. I mean, if you look at the amount of children who are suffering from learning disabilities, all those sorts of things nowadays, and and the cancers that are out there, you kind of go, has something happened, or was it just not diagnosed in the past? So I think it's very definitely a combination of the two, in that it wasn't ever addressed, it wasn't ever discussed in our parents' generation, and so that passed on to us, and then we are living, and Joburg specifically, and I love Joburg, but if you've got friends in other places in the country, we are in a particularly manic city. Things are coming at us from every angle, all hours of the day. We're rushing from pillar to post, and it doesn't help because we feel like we've got to be all things to everyone. And you do, I mean, I think all three of us have said that. You need to take a step back and look at yourself and where you're at, and breathe, because we can't be everything to everyone.
I think it's also social media. Sorry, Terence. Social media is just bombarding us with bad news. Back in the day, our parents didn't have to know every single occurrence on every corner of the planet. But yeah, sorry, Terence.
No, I was actually just going to echo exactly what both you and Claire said. Definitely, through my own journey, I can see that my dad definitely suffered with anxiety and depression, and he didn't have an opportunity to get it diagnosed. And it's not going to get easier, right? Like, life's not going to get, this stuff isn't going to disappear for our kids. So it is crucial that we do the work now, so that our kids don't have to do all the work later on. You know, it's part of the things of, like, you want to build a financial legacy for your kids. You know, you want them to be educated, and you want them to be healthy, and you want them to, you know, go into life with a bit of security. And this is one of those other things that we have to think about, doing the work now. Putting that foundations in, so you know, doing the work that you know, Natasha, you were talking about with your kids, so that when they're our age, it's not like you have to go through the mental breakdown that Terence had to go through and have these huge revelations that are really painful to go through. But it's just, oh no, I've received the training from my parents because they did that work earlier. So unfortunately, it's kind of on our generation at the moment.
Okay, well, I don't see any other questions. I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us, and Terence and Claire, it's been lovely working with you guys. Hope we can work together going forward. I hope you all have a very electricity-filled evening ahead of you. And yeah, please follow us for more information and upcoming events. And then, like I said, we'll send out an email tomorrow with a video and just a basic overview of what we discussed, and then some offerings that some of our speakers have for you. All right. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Tash. Thank you for organizing. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tash.
Bye.
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 Cheers.